Hello, it's Sunday the 23rd of February and it's been a busy sort of day today, which is why I'm standing here in the slightly lowering sun. The sun is over to my right here and I'm standing in a different place again. To my left here, this is the side wall of the male dormitory just by our accommodation up on the first floor, and behind me you can see down into the courtyard that surrounds the clinic main, where all the offices and the doctors are. And the building at the bottom is actually the meeting room. It's a round room without walls, and it makes a very nice meeting room. And the meetings feel quite different when you're having them in an open area and in a round area without a table in between all the people at the meeting, the protagonators we might call them. Been an interesting couple of weeks. I put up a different film for you last week. I hope you've managed to see that. An old one about the disaster, but nonetheless extremely, still very potent and well worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet. That was on both Facebook and I put it in the miscellaneous bit in the YouTube channel, Bhopal Space Today. I had a funny incident. Not last week, not this current week, but the week before, when I think I mentioned before that I've got a private client I go and see in near his home actually, and we went there, and they had invited a friend to come along, a friend who had some slight problems with back pain, and he brought MRIs along for me to look at. I read the reports, and then as we were sitting there I said to Sudhir is the physiotherapy who's been working with the patient that I see come out for some years now, and I said to him fairly quietly so that not too many people would hear, I said, actually, I said, I don't often look at the pictures themselves. I said, what's most important to me and what I understand the best is the written report that the doctors, the specialists in reading MRIs, because they're very difficult to read. People often think it's an easy task. It isn't. And so I said to Sudhir, I often, sometimes I look at the pictures just to give the patient a bit of confidence and think that I know what I'm doing when I look at the MRI. X-rays are one thing. They're a little bit easy to see, but the MRIs are really complicated. And he gave a sort of smile and looked at me. He said, I do that sometimes as well. It gives the patient a bit of confidence that you know what you're doing. So it's quite fun and interesting that that we still have that that mischievous sort of thing. We know the patient wants to see me looking at it, and it gives them confidence to see me looking at it. I get all the information I need out of the written report, but they want me to look at the real pictures. So that was quite amusing. We also had an emergency in the observation room today. I was in there working. I can't remember who it was now. Azam maybe. And in came through the door came a poor woman desperately working for breath. Breathing problems are very common here. The gas, you can imagine the results of the gas. One of the results is bound to be breathing problems, and there are many of them indeed. But this poor woman, probably in her late 30s, possibly early 40s, came in struggling for breath. So I did my best to sit her down. Shabnam had gone because we've been a bit short of a couple of people in the pathology lab, and Shabnam is the first call to go and do the blood tests and work in the pathology lab. So she wasn't here, but so I sat on a bedside, calming this woman down, trying to get her to slow down her breath and relax a little bit. And I shouted to my patient, I had to send him running off down the clinic to try and find her, because I thought she was in the path lab, but I wasn't quite sure, so I didn't want to risk ringing the number and then have to ring, apart from which I was sitting with this young woman. And so he had to run off and get Shabnam, who quickly came back and sorted out the woman, and we got her sitting on the nebulizer for a few minutes, and that calmed her down and gave her another time for taking breath. So it's a big problem here. I mean, the staffing is one issue. The staff from the Path Lab had gone away. Not enough nurses to cover the place altogether. The other nurses, 2 nurses, Aziza, was fully employed in the gynecological unit at the time. She would have been the second backup to get down to look after this woman. But there are not many emergencies such as that, but there are a few. I've certainly been around in the clinic when there have been. From time to time, maybe on average one emergency in each of my visits, I would guess. So it's not huge, but nonetheless, when an emergency happens, you have to deal with it there and then. You can't spend time going looking for somebody. Fortunately, I had a patient with me. He was dressed, and he could and was happy to go and look for her. And anybody would have been happy to go and look for her. So he did that, came back, got back on the table, we continued our treatment, and he got an extra few minutes for that as well, though I think I had somebody coming. So that was an interesting 2 completely different experiences with treatments. One sort of nice thing that happened to me, I can't quite decide. I was walking back from, I can't remember where I've been, walking back down the road and coming past the house or the home of my very first patient here in Bhavna, Sambhavna, way back in 2011, I think it was. I need to check that in my diary. A long time ago anyway, nearly 10 years ago at any rate. Abdul, his name was, and he had a knee problem. And I remember him telling me, he's a little bit overweight, but not hugely. And I remember him telling me that there was an awful lot of kneeling down and standing up in the mosque, and that might be making his knee worse. So I said, well, can you sit at the back instead of doing that? Maybe he did. And outside the front door was a young man standing with a little baby girl in his arms, and he said to me, "Hello, Ian." It was Abdul's son, who I hadn't actually seen face to face for some time, but he said he'd seen me around in the clinic, so he knew I was here. Maybe he'd spotted me coming down the road, and he was standing there with his daughter, Abdul's granddaughter. And I said, Abdul was my first patient in the clinic. He says, "Yes, I know." I said, "How is Abdul?" Half wondering, because he was in his mid-70s, I think, then. And he said, that he had died, in fact. So that was a bit sad, but it was really nice to think that there's this young man. I remember one occasion, he actually took me on his motorbike. I wanted to buy a white shirt or a couple of white shirts, and it's only recently that I got rid of them. They're worn out. I used to wear them for working. Here I don't do that anymore. But so it was really nice to be recognised and learn. If it's a little bit sad that Abdul is now gone, it's still nice to know what happens to the people I worked with on all those years ago, and so that was a nice little visit, and that he remembered me, and we had a little chat in the street before I continued on our way, and I came back to Sambhavna. So that's my news for the moment. The weather, just very quickly, it's getting very hot now. I think the last time I spoke we had quite hot days, but the nights were cool or cold even. Now you don't need a blanket at all. It is that hot, and it changed very rapidly actually over the last week, I suppose, from being those chilly evenings to now I'm standing here in the evening and I'm perfectly warm and comfortable, even though the sun has disappeared over the buildings in the distance there. So good night from me, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll speak to you or give you an interview next week. Thanks very much. Bye.